Thanks, Joe. Well, there's a pretty good chance Idaho's Senate will take up two separate school choice bills on the exact same day. One would be the Senate version, the one that would expand the Empowering Parents program and install a few more accountability guardrails. The other would be House Bill 93, the tax credit bill whose only accountability is a parent survey, which, as you can see right now, is currently being debated in a Senate committee. We dissected this bill last week when it barely made it out of the House Revenue and Taxation Committee. And in doing so, we got a lot of messages with the common refrain, how can we support public money for private school education when we aren't already adequately funding our public schools? We also got this message from Bill asking, what's the definition of a fully funding public education for K-12? Is there ever enough money? I guess the question is there a number? Well, it depends on who you ask. But if you do take it back a few years, like more than 30, we can tell you the Idaho legislature has not met that definition of fully funding public education, at least according to the Idaho Supreme Court. In 1990, there was a lawsuit filed on behalf of several Idaho school districts, challenging the constitutionality of Idaho's school funding mechanism. Basically, are lawmakers allocating enough money toward it like the Constitution says they should? The attorney at the time was Robert Huntley, a former Supreme Court justice himself. And the suit was appealed to the Supreme Court several times in 1993, in 1996, and in 1998. And each time, the state's highest court decided, no, the legislature was not providing enough money to instruct Idaho K-12 students. The same case came back to the Supreme Court two more times. Only this time it was challenging the fact that the state wasn't putting enough money toward maintaining and building adequate school buildings. In 2005, the last time it came in front of the Supreme Court justices, they ruled the state was not meeting its constitutional duty to, quote, establish and maintain a general, uniform, and thorough system of public free common schools. So what's changed since then? Well, not enough, according to one of the Idaho Supreme Court justices who helped come to that conclusion in 2005. That'd be former Justice Jim Jones, who told us today what the court basically told the state 2 decades ago.
Do better, and you cannot rely on the local property tax. It has to be paid by the legislature. The legislature has never fulfilled its obligation from that time to the present time. They've taken a tiny step last year with House Bill 521. They said, well, we're going to come up with $2 billion over 10 years. Well, your station reported last year that West Ada is going to need $1.1 billion itself to service the kids of people who are moving in. And it's obvious that what the legislature has done is not going to cut it. It's not going to come anywhere near bringing those dilapidated buildings up to code and building new school buildings. A safe environment conducive to learning. Those are the key words.
Asked about a number, if there was ever a goal assigned to what would be adequate funding, Justice Jones points to a recent article in ProPublica.
And it kind of gave the idea that we had to do at least double what we're doing now, both on the instructional side and on the facilities side. Just take what you're doing now and double it, and you might be in the ballpark.
That's a big pill to swallow for a lot of people in the State House.
If you educate your kids properly, the return on the investment is going to be tremendous.
Okay, so in 2005, you were part of that Supreme Court that made that decision, and you were on the Supreme Court up through 2017. And if you saw that the state legislature wasn't basically following the orders and doing what they're supposed to do to adequately fund education, why didn't anybody say anything from the court's perspective?
Well, the court has got to wait for somebody to bring a case before it. We can't just sort of, look at the situation and say, well, gee, somebody needs to do something about that. The plaintiffs were left with the opportunity to come back and say that it wasn't being done. That didn't happen.
But you're thinking somebody could soon?
I think that could happen. And
if they do you think the outcome would still be the same?
I think that you could put on a really good case that the state is not meeting its responsibility either on the instructional side or on the facility side. That may be a pipe dream, but you know, I think that something like that has to happen. You have to tell these people graphically that they're not doing their job. That's one of the main things that they have, that the legislature has under the Constitution, to make a uniform and thorough system of public education. They haven't done it.
And I'm not really sure what another lawsuit would do, since they didn't really listen since 2005, as you heard Justice Jones says. He regrets not requiring or putting in some sort of mechanism, Justice Jones told us today, or some sort of monitor that would make sure the state fulfills its duty. Something like, I don't know, Kids Learning Index set up by experts to make sure the schools are getting what they need. And that idea may not be far off, though. We took Bill's question to Idaho's Superintendent of Public Instruction, Debbie Critchfield, because there is a slew of numbers that show Idaho is still not spending enough on education. We rank 40th when it comes to average teacher pay, about $63,000 a year. We remain last when it comes to per student spending, about $9,800 a year. We have an $80 million funding gap in special education. In 2022, the Office of Performance Evaluations put out a study showing it would cost the state $847 million just to get Idaho school buildings up to good condition. Also in 2022, there were $1 billion in bond requests on ballots across the state. This year, Superintendent Critchfield is asking for nearly $3 billion to be put toward public education, which would be an increase of just under 3% over last year. But as she told us today, there's an equal faction to this funding question, and it isn't just about how much money we put in.
We hear a lot, hey, we need more money, we need more money. And I think it's okay to ask the question, well, at what point do we say that's enough? Because no government can sustain just this trajectory of growth where we're just constantly dumping in more money, but we feel like, is it going where we want it to go? Do we have the outcomes that we have? The legislature will say, well, we appropriated more money in the last 5 years than we've ever put into education. That is in fact true. Then our district and school charter leaders say, we're not getting all the money that was appropriated. That is also true, because the funding mechanism is so outdated for the needs of the modern classroom that money that is put into the public schools budget ends up getting left on the table because there's not a mechanism to send it out based on the types of kids that are in the classrooms.
What do you mean?
So we're sending it out based on support units, not based on kids. So we're saying if you have 1,000 students in your district, we're going to send you enough money for 700 of those people. Well, our districts are saying, but we still have fixed cost. But the line items that are in the public schools budget only allow you to use the money according to how that money was put into place 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So we haven't gone back to say the money that's been appropriated and that we're giving to districts, is it being used in the way that we need it now? Is it aligned to the priorities that we have now? My answer to that is no, but no part of the budget takes into account that some students cost more. But the current system says, regardless of how much it costs to educate the kids in your community, we're going to keep sending you the same amount of money, and we're never going to change. And that's what we've got to fix.
Is taking $50 million out of the general fund that could go toward education, say with a school choice tax credit, how is that helping?
I don't think it helps any of the places that the state funds. That takes away from roads, that takes away from jails, it takes away from education. I can see why for some that's an attractive way to do it, because you say, well, I didn't take it out of the public schools budget. Well, that's true, but it also wasn't available for the public schools budget. Do we expect that we'll need to put more money into the public education budget? Absolutely. But where we put it and how we send it out is almost more important than the number that's coming in.
So bottom line, yes, Idaho can direct more money to public schools, and a $50 million hit to the tax revenue isn't quite going to help that. But we can also update the funding formula to make sure the money is going where it needs to go, according to Critchfield. For example, Superintendent Critchfield told us back in 2022, when we had a large surplus of money, a lot of that coming in from COVID, the governor signed off on a $300 million increase in school spending, the largest in state history at the time. But she told us $165 million of that $300 million remained locked away because of the outdated formula and requirements to get that money out of that bucket. antiquated boxes to check and language like how the state determines funding for the number of people needed to serve students in a certain district, those, what you call them, district support units, as they call it. Listen to this. Divide the actual average daily attendance, excluding students approved for inclusion in the exceptional child educational program, divided by the appropriate divisor from the tables of support units in this section, then add the quotients to obtain. It just goes on, and it's a lot of math. Superintendent Critchfield, she wants to change this. She says she's planning on bringing a bill to the State House tomorrow to start changing some of the ways the state sends money to schools. Because, as she says, putting money in the account, it's a big part of it. But getting the legislature to stop rigging the system against the kids is just as big.